Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brøgger, and if you're new here, I really hope I'll earn your subscription today. Today, I got something that I wanted to try. I bought it myself, and I'm not sponsored or anything. I just thought it had some cool stuff inside. So, what is it? It's the Army Painter's Starter Set, and I think it was pretty cool. I actually only bought it because I wanted the miniatures, and I know the Army Painter already made tutorial videos on how to paint them. But I just want to see how easy it actually is, and if you can do it with only the stuff that's inside this box. So, we better get started. I really love this box art, and I think this dragon is cool. They included a brush and some paints, and of course the 5 miniatures. Let's see what's inside. Ooh, there's a box with a mandatory painting guide. I really love these army painting guides. They are very good and interesting reading. And then we have an Adventure Starter Set manual. This is how to assemble the miniatures, and there's a map, because there's a tiny backstory for these characters. And then there's a translation table, because the naming of these paints, which are the Warpaint fanatics, are not named the same. But we will get back to that later. On this side we have some advertising material. And then we have the painting guide. And on the back side, all the characters have their own QR code that will link you to the Army Painter's painting guide. Some more advertising material for all the Warpaint fanatics, and a color table that will show you all the colors in the range. And finally, we get down to what's very interesting. We have some paints, some strong tone and silver metallic. Gold, that's nice. And a couple of effect paints. We have the fresh blood and the brush on primer. This is very important. And then there's a brush, and it's bent. And I think, yeah, it is a starter brush. This is a standard brush, and it's pretty good. If it wasn't bent, I might have to use one of my own. Yeah, I will definitely use one of my own. If this should happen to you if you bought this box, I would contact customer services and get a replacement brush, because this is pretty useless and it will be very difficult to get a decent result with this type of brush, especially when it's bent like this. And the reason why this is bent is because this protective cover has fallen off during shipping. That's very unfortunate. And then we have a sprue with all these nice miniatures. We will have a closer look at them later. But there's more in the box. We need some more paints, and here they are. 10 Warpaint fanatics in different kinds of colors, and I think the selection of colors here is very good. You can always mix them and get all the colors you need. So basically I think you only need this set to start with, and then you can practically do anything you want. I own the complete set and the full range of all the Warpaint fanatics, and this is one thing that really annoys me, that they have changed the naming of all the paints in the Gamemaster series. It is exactly the same paints as the Warpaint fanatics, so why not just use the same names? I really don't understand why you have to look up in a translation table to find the right color if you need to buy more of it. You have to do better on that, Army Painter. Okay, let's have a look at these miniatures. I'm usually printing my own miniatures on my 3D printer, and I'm not very used to cutting things off sprues. I was just so excited that I just started to nip off all the bases, and then it just hit me. Okay, these have numbers and they have different kinds of fits, so maybe I should just slow down and cut one miniature off the sprue at a time, instead of making my own puzzle and try to guess where everything goes and fits the best. And this is the wrong base, you fool. So I started to follow the numbers and cut off the right miniature for the right base, because all these miniatures are a press fit and they just snap together without using glue. They need a lot of cleaning though. There's a lot of leftovers from the spruce, and I use my side cutter and a knife to remove all the leftovers from the sprue. And then it just snaps on the base with a nice press fit. When working with this type of miniatures on spruce, it's very important to smooth everything out from the sprue marks. I primarily use a knife and then I use some sand sticks. These are very useful and very easy to work with, and I will leave a link in the description below where you can buy some of these. One thing I also noticed is that there is a lot of bad casting marks on these miniatures. And it's like there's a seam all the way through the miniature where the two parts of the mold met, and it seems like they were not fit well together, and some of the plastic were making a mark all along the middle of the miniature. I spent more than a good hour on cleaning up these miniatures, but I think it's really worth it because you will see every little mark or mistake in the miniature when they are painted. Maybe this could be an idea for the army painter to throw in one of these sanding sticks, because they are very useful when you're working with miniatures on spruce, and even 3D print them, because I also have some support material marks that I need to clean off after I have printed a miniature. I think these miniatures are an average quality, but I think they're good enough for a beginner that are new to the hobby to get started. Let's prime all these miniatures, and you have to notice this: shake well. This is important for every paint, no matter what brand it is, you have to shake them well. The army painter have added a couple of metal balls in each dropper bottles of all their paints, and this will make the shaking process a lot easier. I put a good amount of primer on my wet palette, which is also a product from the army painter, and I will leave a link in the description below. This is not a sponsored link or anything, this is just a service to you if you're interested to know more. I use the medium dry brush that was included in the set to put on the primer on all the miniatures. To make sure everything plastic was covered, I gave them 2 coats of the primer. The primer is drying pretty fast, but I will leave them here for a couple of minutes before I move on. And then to the bent brush. I decided that I will use one of my own good brushes. This is an Artis Opus S size 2. This brush matches the one that came with the box pretty good in the size. And I will only use this brush all the way through this paint job, except when I'm going to use washes. Then I will use this brush that came with the box. I will leave a non-affiliate link in the description below to the Artis Opus S brush. This will not be a paint guide. Army Painter already did some very good guides for painting all these 5 miniatures. I'll just show you a couple of ideas and angles and how I approach painting all these miniatures with only the paints that came in the box. For the Tiefling Warlock, I will start with his skin color, and for that I'll just use natural red as it is called in this box, but the real name of this color is pure red. And with a damp brush I will just gently dip it into the red paint. And make sure that only half of the bristles touches the paint. The rest should just contain water. And then I'll just apply it to his face, hands, and later I found out that he also had a tail that needed some paint. For his cloak, I put up a drop of gray and some of the black on my wet palette, and then I mixed it together and I thought, I want to have a blue tint to it, so I added a drop of blue. And I think this color mix turned out pretty good. I'm not afraid of mixing up colors and make some trial and errors until I have the result that I want. But if you're not comfortable with mixing colors, you can also just apply all the colors as is on all 5 of the miniatures. It's a lot easier, and I think the result is pretty good. And this is the way the army painter shows it in their painting videos. I needed a darker red for the edges of this robe, and again I just mixed up a couple of colors. This time I took some black and some of the red. It is very difficult, and the result of putting black into a color to make it darker can vary, but this time I was lucky and it turned out pretty good. All the base coating is now done, and to give some more oomph, as I call it, to the shadows, I will use the strong tone. I put some of the strong tone into my silicone fidget popper, and then I will use the brush that came with the set. It will darken all the colors one tone, and therefore we need to make some highlights when it's dry. The dry time of the washes are a bit longer than the acrylic paints, so you have to be patient and let it dry, because if it haven't cured up fully, it will reactivate the wash, and it's not a good thing. And another thing, if you experience that the wash will cure and dry glossy, you haven't shaked it good enough, and then it's a do-over. When the wash is dry, it should turn out matte. And while we wait for the wash to dry, I didn't put wash on the flame in the tiefling's hand, so we will start painting a light yellow. First I gave the flame a base color with white, and now I have mixed some yellow and white to make this bright yellow color. And then I will build up with a darker orange and finally a red, and we have a perfect flame. I will also make some smaller highlights and adjustments to the stone in the staff of this warlock. I will mix in some white to the green to make it a bit lighter, and then apply the highlights. I used the side of the bristles to paint all the edges. You can almost call it something like micro dry brushing, because you're only hitting the top of the edge. The face will also need a couple of highlights, and I made a lighter red by mixing in some white. And this warlock is now ready for the table. I think he turned out pretty good. And this is the human rogue. To get better control when painting such tiny miniatures, I used this wooden dowel. I'll use these double adhesive pads. They are nice and soft, and they fit perfectly on top of my wooden dowel. And then I will put the miniature on top of it, and it will sit here nice and comfortably while I put some paint on it. And for the skin on the face and the hands, I will use this rosy skin. This is what's originally called the barbarian flesh in the fanatic war paints. And for the cloak, I will mix some black and green to make a nice dark green color. Mixing black into a color won't necessarily make the color that you expect, so you have to do some tries. And after I have applied all the base colors and given the whole miniature a wash, I started to highlight the face and some of the details on the leatherwork on her clothing. I also used the plate metal metallic paint on her sword, buttons and braces. And funny enough, the plate mail metal kept its name from the warpaint fanatics. And after putting down some more details with the gold paint, I think this is done. And she turned out pretty good too. And then we have the female fighter. I wanted her hair to be like golden blonde, and I mixed up some yellow and white, and later I will put down some washes on it. And for her clothing, I want some darker red. Again, I mixed some black into the red, but this time I didn't do it as much, so I got a less darker red than I did earlier. I used some of the browns that came with the set. I mixed in some black to make a bit darker brown for the shoes, and I used the straight color out of the bottle for the leatherworks on her armor. And again, I gave the full miniature a wash, let it dry, and then I started to paint some details with the metallics. And now this female fighter is ready for the table. And I think she turned out pretty good. But I had some difficulties with the face because of the molding errors on this miniature. There was a mold line all the way through her nose, and it made her face look a bit distorted. On the Elven Ranger, I will use the green straight off the bottle. I'll later apply a wash on top of it and use the same green for highlighting it. The bow I will paint pure white, because I will also apply a wash later on top of this to make it look like ivory. And after I have painted all the base colors and minor details, I splashed on some wash. And this time I actually splashed it all over the miniature, head, hair, everything, clothing, all the details. And then I could highlight everything after that. I started painting this miniature late in the evening, and now I'll just leave it overnight and resume tomorrow. The next day I could start doing all the highlights. Here I'm fixing the hair and making it pop a bit. I mixed in some white to the brown just to make it a bit brighter. I'll also put in some details with the metallic paint on his armor. And some tiny strokes of gold on the bow. Now the ranger can see some action on the table. I think this model turned out pretty good. The dwarven cleric is mostly armor, but there is some of his clothing that's actually visible. And I thought, there is no purple in this set, so why don't we just mix some red and blue and make our own. And for the beard and hair I used the wildfire orange. And this is the same color as the burning ore from the fanatic range. There is a lot of metal on this dwarf, and I used the plate mail metal and the dwarf gold, I think it's called. Yeah, it's just so weird with these name changes. The real name of this gold is the greedy gold. And then I could apply a wash, and I did the same thing here as I did with the ranger. I just soaked the whole miniature in wash. I set him to dry for about an hour, and then I was ready to paint some more details on this guy. And for the beard, I just used the same out of the bottle color orange. The metallic paints are very dull after this wash, and just edge highlighting the silver and with the gold, it just makes everything pop. And now this dwarven cleric can see some action on the table. There's only one paint I haven't mentioned yet, and this is the fresh blood. This is an effect paint, and in the real range it's called True Blood. I don't know why it should have this name, but that's how it is. And this one I will just apply with the brush. I'll actually just dip it and barely touch it to apply this blood effect. And this is a bit more messy way to do it, but it's fun. I'll just soak a lot of the blood effect into the dry brush, and then I will just scratch it and let it spray all over the cleric's weapon. And then I noticed something. I forgot to paint the rim on the dwarven cleric. I always paint the rim as the last thing on a miniature, just to make a note that this is done and I won't apply any more paint to it. So, is this set worth buying? I would definitely say yes if you are a new painter and you're just curious about how to paint miniatures. I think this is a very good start. The quality of the miniatures is, I would call it average. They are not perfect, and there was some mistakes in one of them with a distorted face. But otherwise, I think it's an okay starting point if you're new to this hobby, and I would really encourage everybody who's just a tiny bit curious about how you paint miniatures and want to try it out for yourself. It's not that hard. You just have to jump right into it. The only thing that really annoys me with this is that they renamed all the paints. And I know they put in this translation table, but it could just have been avoided if they just called the paints what the real names are. And it would be a lot easier if you run out of one of the paints and you want to buy a new one. You don't have to look it up in a table. But let's have a closer look on how these miniatures turned out. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I really appreciate you being here. And if you think I've earned it, I really hope you'll hit that subscribe button. I will be back soon with some more terrain build this time. And I don't know if it will be next week, but maybe the week after I will be ready with another video. Goodbye for now.